My name is Sanat Hassan from Jordan.
Dennis from Uganda.
Maria, I'm from Romania.
Zach Love from the United States. And I support Streets for Life.
My name's Grace, I'm from Australia and I support Streets for Life.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. A very warm welcome to the 6th United Nations Global Road Safety Week. My name is Mariam Namazi and I will be your host for today's event. Over the past decade, it's estimated that more than 2 million children and young people have lost their lives in traffic collisions on the world's roads. Another 100 million have been injured. It's the leading cause of death of children over the age of 5 years old and of adolescents. And many of those who are injured are left with life-changing, maiming injuries or disabilities. That's why we're here today. The figures I just mentioned to you are stark, and it affects us all. And that's why there's growing demand now for a new approach, one which puts the vulnerable first. Today, we'll connect with people all around the world to understand how road traffic injuries affect our daily lives. We'll also be hearing from some of the world's leading policymakers about why action on speed is so important, and about a new vision for the world cities, one that is safe and healthy for people, especially the most vulnerable, and for our environment. Today is a call for action, for low-speed, livable streets everywhere, to save lives. We'll focus on what needs to be done to achieve this. We'll also look at how lowering speed can play a vital role in our efforts to combat climate change. I know that many of you are already taking the initiative, you're already taking action, so hopefully today's launch will inspire you to join the Streets for Life campaign for UN Road Safety Week and to keep pushing for real change across your cities and communities. The World Health Organization is the leading UN agency on road safety and is co-hosting today's launch with the FIA Foundation. So let's now hear from one of the most important global figures on this issue, the WHO's Director General, Dr. Tedros.
Every year, more than 1.3 million people die in road traffic crashes. That's one person every 24 seconds. Road traffic crashes are the leading cause of death for children and young adults. We have made so much progress, but we still have a long road ahead. We need a new vision for creating safe, healthy, green, and livable cities. Low-speed streets are an important part of that vision. Evidence shows that limiting driving speeds to 30 kilometers or 20 miles per hour in cities significantly reduces road traffic deaths and injuries. It also promotes healthier lifestyles through walking and cycling and decreases air and noise pollution. WHO is committed to supporting countries and cities to implement speed management and other safety measures. Cities must not only set sensible speed limits, but also enforce them. Safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport systems just make good sense. As we recover and rebuild from COVID-19, let's make safer roads for a safer world. I thank you.
Dr. Tedros, thank you very much. Now we want to hear from a very special lady, Viviane Perón. Together with families whose children have been killed on the roads of Argentina, Viviane set up Asociación Madres del Dolor, or Mothers in Pain. Viviane lost her son Kevin, who was just 14 years old, when he was hit and killed by a man driving at twice the speed limit. So let's now hear Viviane's testimony and call to action on behalf of road traffic victims everywhere.
Hello, I'm Viviane Perrone, Kevin Sedano's mother. I'm a member of the NGO Asociación Madres del Dolor in Argentina and International Road Victims Partnership. Speed kills. The higher the speed, the greater the chance of ending with somebody's life. That's what happened to my son Kevin when he was run over by a driver that was going at double the amount of speed allowed on the road. And this is what happens to many victims and to many of those that are injured on our roads all over the world. We need 30 kilometers per hour on urban streets to save lives and to avoid all of those from being injured. So, to all of those that have the power and that have the authority of changing this reality, please do it now. While I'm talking, another life is lost and many others are being injured. While I'm talking, another family is destroyed and another chair at a family table will remain empty forever.
Viviane, thank you so much for those moving words. Now, of course, our cities are at the very heart of this issue, and go to any major city in the world and at some point you'll find yourself confronting the traffic, pollution and road danger, a lack of safety to protect the vulnerable. So let's now hear from the global agency focused on our cities, the UN Habitat, and its Executive Director, Maimouna Mohd Sharif.
Excellencies, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of UN Habitat, I am very happy to join you in marking the UN Road Safety Week. I take the opportunity to congratulate Dr. Tedros, Director General of the World Health Organization, and Mr. John Todd, Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety, for their leadership in maintaining the focus on the issue of road safety in these difficult times of the current pandemic. We must not forget that with more than 1.35 million deaths annually, road safety is the other crisis that we face, together with COVID-19 and climate change. As with the other crises, cities have a major role to reduce the burden of injuries and death from road crashes. Properly designed streets and bike lanes can prevent speeding and protect the most vulnerable road users, cyclists, and pedestrians from road crashes. It is also important to reduce the numbers of cars on roads by improving and expanding public transport. We have noticed an upsurge of walking and cycling in several cities in the wake of the COVID crisis. This is one of the trends that could help us build back better and greener in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. Simultaneously, we must also ensure that trust in public transport is regained and that governments invest in the modernization of their public transport systems to become safe and accessible for all. As guided by the new urban agenda, I assure you that UN Habitat will continue to work with governments, other UN agencies, civil society, and the private sectors to address the global challenge of road safety and integrate it into the sustainable mobility and transport infrastructure planning and design. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Director Maimuna Mohd Sharif. Now we can hear from the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety, Jean Todt. If we're going to achieve safe, low-speed streets around the world, political commitment is going to be absolutely key in this. Jean Todt has been leading the global advocacy for many years, getting support from governments and world leaders. Let's now hear from the UN Special Envoy.
Dear friends, I'm delighted to join you to launch the 6th UN Global Road Safety Week. As the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety, I'm proud that countless activities are taking place to celebrate the global campaign, which highlights a range of benefits of 30 kilometers an hour or 20 miles per hour speed limits. Implementing this recommendation in streets with mixed traffic and where children live, walk and play is life-saving. In addition to reducing road traffic deaths and injuries, lower speeds can encourage more walking and cycling and help us shift to zero-carbon mobility. Furthermore, low-speed streets are central to building resilient communities, especially as we recover from COVID-19 and journey towards a safer, healthier, greener, and more inclusive world. Streets for Life contribute to achieving many of our Sustainable Development Goals, and especially to our two targets, SDG 3.6 to halve global road deaths and injuries, and 11.2 to provide access to safe, affordable and sustainable transport for all by 2030. This Global Road Safety Week is particularly important because it helps us announce the start of our second decade of action for road safety, and it brings attention to upcoming milestones such as the launch of the Global Plan and the high-level meeting on road safety in 2022. I join you in building this momentum, and I firmly believe in our collective ability to save lives on the roads. I wish you a successful Road Safety Week.
Thank you, Jean. We now turn to the former mayor of New York City and leading global philanthropist on road safety, Michael Bloomberg.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for taking part in Road Safety Week. Making streets safer is one of our best opportunities to save and improve lives around the world. But road safety doesn't get nearly the attention it should. Together, we can change that. When streets are safe and accessible and vibrant, cities thrive. The best part is we know how to do it, with good design and smart rules like lower speed limits. Through our Global Road Safety Initiative and the Partnership for Healthy Cities, more and more cities are taking action and sharing strategies that can work all over the world. The more cities join us, the more progress we can make. Working together, we really can save many lives and build a safer, healthier, greener, better future for everyone. Thanks again, and all the best.
Thank you, Michael. Now, in the past few days leading up to UN Road Safety Week, the government of Spain has made a bold commitment to reduce speeds in its cities to 30 kilometers per hour to protect the vulnerable and to improve air quality. So we now have Minister of the Interior, Fernando Grande Marlaska Gómez.
En España hemos implantado la velocidad límite de 30 km por hora para todas las calles de nuestras ciudades con un único carril de circulación. ¿Y por qué lo hemos hecho? Porque nos lo habían pedido las principales ciudades del país. También porque es un paso adelante y una ayuda a los responsables municipales para ir hacia unas ciudades más humanas, siempre más amables. Porque calmar el tráfico es la mejor forma de garantizar la seguridad en la interacción de los diferentes actores de la movilidad. Porque las calles son para vivir y las ciudades, evidentemente, son para los ciudadanos. Y también porque nos ha parecido de sentido común que con un único carril de circulación no se puede ir a más de 30 km por hora. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Minister Gomez. Now, if you're looking for a leading light on road safety, look no further than Sweden. The country has pioneered the safe system approach with a philosophy that no injury, no fatality on our roads is ever acceptable. Last year, Sweden hosted leaders from around the world in a global summit to set up the new decade of action for road safety. And low speeds is at the heart of that agenda. Let's now hear from Minister Thomas Eneroth.
My fellow road safety champions and friends, good afternoon. Greetings from Stockholm, Sweden. And first, allow me to extend my gratitude to the World Health Organization and the UN Regional Commissions for organizing the 6th UN Global Road Safety Week. My appreciation goes to all partners of the UN Road Safety Collaboration for your commitments to making our streets safer for everyone and everywhere. Let us recall the 3rd Global Ministerial Conference on Road Safety last year, during which I had the pleasure of welcoming many of you to Stockholm. The conference gathered over 1,700 delegates from more than 140 countries, including representatives from civil society and the private sector. The strong turnout from such a broad range of stakeholders did not only highlight the importance of global road safety, but also the fact that road safety is a shared responsibility that falls on all our shoulders. A result of the conference was the Stockholm Declaration. The declaration presents an ambitious and forward-looking agenda for connecting road safety to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. The UN General Assembly endorsed the Stockholm Declaration last year, which calls on all of us to turn our ambitions into concrete actions. My friends, this year we initiate the 2nd decade of action for road safety, during which we must work together to reduce traffic-related deaths and injuries by at least 50% by 2030. This work requires an approach where we must encourage both the public and the private sector, together with the civil society, to take ownership of the road safety issue. Together, we must inject a sense of urgency in our road safety ambitions. Let us realize the message in the Stockholm Declaration by investing in infrastructure, support innovation and implement new technologies. At the Stockholm Conference, I said, now it's time for decision making. Words on paper are important, but it is how we act and what we do that really matters. And today, I would now like to finish up by once again offer my commitments and Sweden's commitments. But we need your commitment too. It is now our, both mine and yours, responsibility to make our common ambitions and visions into reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Eneroth. Now, as we've been hearing, road traffic injury is the leading cause of death of young people worldwide, and the impact on the younger generation is often neglected. So with that in mind, we now want to hear from a leading road safety campaigner in Jordan, Sana Khassaoune.
What comes to your mind when I say the word city? Traffic, noise, congestion, pollution. Our cities are becoming more car dependent, and that makes us anxious about our safety every time we step out of our homes. As a kid, The city to me was basically the street. The street where I learned to ride a bike for the first time, where I waited for my school bus, where I walked to the market nearby. It is a place that gave me a multiplicity of choice to get around easily. Today, as a young person, I am losing my sense of place, as I'm limited to be inside a vehicle whenever I'm moving around. Our streets are designed to occupy more cars and less people. Speed limits are not set to accommodate the safety of road users. We in the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety have brought together the voices of 1,500 young people from over 92 countries in our youth statement to reflect on our cities in this global crisis we have inherited. The way past generations shaped our cities impacts our safety every single day, as over 1,000 young lives are lost on the world's unsafe roads. Our youth statement highlights the glaring threats we face of the badly designed street environment, poor regulations, and high speed limits. The COVID-19 pandemic brought another challenge to the table, as less people are tending to use public transportation today. We are claiming our space and joining the Streets for Life campaign to demand lowering speed limits to 30 kilometers per hour. We want streets that are safe and dynamic for living, where people have multiple access to move around safely. We, the youth, are a part of the road safety solution. Will you join us?
So around the world, people are campaigning on 30 kilometers an hour. Let's now hear from those campaigners, voices from the streets on giving the streets back to the people.
For our streets to be safe and reduce of road crashes, I advocate for 30 kilometers per hour for the sake of safety for our children and adults alike.
We need low-speed streets in our community.
Low-speed streets are safer for children to walk, to play and to live.
I love my street being low speed because it's safer for me to cross with my children.
I support 30-kilometre-hour roads because, as well as improving road safety, it also improves the amenity of an area, making it a nicer place to be.
Having low-speed streets in my neighborhood means I can walk freely and safely.
I love my street being low speed because it is safer for children to cross.
So we've heard the word from the street, but how does a 30 kilometre per hour rule really work? I'm joined now by two leading figures who've actually put 30 kilometre per hour livable streets in place. And they're from two very different contexts, Brussels and Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. So joining us now for the first part of our panel, I'm very pleased to welcome Minister of the Government for the Brussels Capital Region, Elke van der Brandt, and Miriam Sadiq, Chief Executive Officer for the Asia Injury Prevention Foundation. Welcome to you both. Minister van der Brandt, if I can begin with you, can you tell us, why is the 30 kilometre per hour limit important, and why did you put it in place in Brussels?
I think the main reason is road security, saving lives. We know that speed is not always the cause of an accident, but it will always aggravate an accident. Driving slower will reduce the number of accidents and will reduce the impact of accidents. So that is the main reason. There are other advantages, but the main reason is about saving lives and having less injuries in our roads.
Right. Miriam Sadiq, let me come to you because you are working in such a different context in Vietnam. I know that you also work in Cambodia, also in Thailand, on implementing these speed management measures. Tell us about the particular challenges that you faced in the region, how the 30 kilometre per hour rule applies in Vietnamese cities, obviously compared to a city like Brussels, where you are, it's much more difficult to get that relevant infrastructure in place.
Yeah, so speed limits here in cities, in the regions where we work, are actually between 50 and 90 kilometers per hour. We have 68 people dying on the roads in Vietnam every single day, and speed is a major contributing factor. But there's very little done to raise awareness about the dangers of speeding. You rarely find the media talk about it, few public service announcements on TV. A problem is that the major mode of transportation here for us is motorcyclists. And when national roads run through a city, often they run through schools, for primary schools, secondary schools. So the people who are walking or who are on bikes, they are so vulnerable because they are exposed to heavy traffic. And they are just next to speeding trucks, and that makes them extremely vulnerable. Until last year in Vietnam, we actually had no flexible speed limits. There was one road, one speed limit, and that meant that legally it was not possible to lower speeds in, for example, in schools or in hospital areas. And the concept of safe school zones also doesn't exist here for us at all. 30 kilometers per hour, inappropriate infrastructure. So yeah, it's really tough for the kids who use these roads every day. Roads are just often designed to speed and not really taking into consideration the community needs. And that's a big issue.
Right. So as you say, the roads are designed for transportation rather than being pedestrianized. And that means that children going to school and other people using those roads are obviously particularly vulnerable. Minister Van den Brandt, how much opposition or pushback did you get to the 30-kilometer rule policy? Because there is this argument that it creates more traffic, more congestion, no one really abides by it, and then it also costs money to make changes in things like traffic signaling, and that is the sort of money that could be spent elsewhere.
I think what's very important to know is that although generalizing 30 kilometers an hour in the whole of the region had some protest, I won't deny it. If you ask people what they want in their street, in their neighborhood, there's a large support to having a 30 kilometer an hour speed limit. We did the test. We did make some questionnaires, some research about the whole of the region, and then go into depth. And we had one neighborhood where it was still 50 an hour. People complained, and after a questionnaire among this little population, they all said 75% of them wanted a 30-kilometer speed limit in their own street, in their own neighborhood, because they're afraid for their children, because they want slower streets, safer streets, quieter streets. And I think that's the importance. That's what we do all the time. That's communicate on the advantage there is for everybody on a very micro scale, not focusing too much on a large scale, but saying we want safe streets for your children, for your parents, for your neighbors. And in every neighborhood in Brussels, we have schools. In every neighborhood, we have children playing. We have people living there, going out. So that's the important, explaining that a city like Brussels is actually a summary of a lot of neighborhoods, and we want this road security in every neighborhood, and that's why we needed to generalize it everywhere. I think also the protest there is about people won't respect it and everything, and there will be more traffic jams. We are measuring that. We are measuring that to show with figures the results. We are measuring the time you need to cross the city. And so far, we don't see extra time needed to get through the city. We don't see that there's more traffic jams. On the contrary, because before the 30-kilometer speed limit, there was also a general speed, on average of 70 kilometers an hour. People couldn't drive faster, but now instead of speeding up until 50, going down, speeding up again, they're driving a little more constant. And so you need the same time to get to your place, but you do it in a more safe way, and that's the advantage we have for everybody.
Talking about road safety, not just in Brussels, but around the world, it's a global issue, and people have already been campaigning for action on speed. We want to connect with one of them now in Nigeria. Ayomide Akimpelu has been lobbying the authorities in the capital, Abuja, to put 30-kilometer per hour limits in place. But so far, there's been little action.
My question is, how are we going to speed up the process of implementing the 30 kilometer per hour due to bureaucracy that is involved?
Right, so an important point we're hearing there about implementation in places where there is low acceptance of speed restrictions. Miriam Sadiq, what is your reaction to that question there? Tell us how you have approached this issue, how you've tried to manage it, and would you say this has been particularly effective in how you have implemented the 30-kilometer-per-hour rule?
In places with low acceptance, you may want to think about proving success at smaller scale first through comprehensive evidence-based programming in a smaller city first, where you can secure local political leadership. In the Vietnamese context, and that goes, I think, for many cities and countries around the world, it's really important to show results at local level first before we bring them up, and then we advocate for nationwide policy change. It's really important to build capacity of local stakeholders, of local government, and to empower them to take action. And that's what we did in Pleiku, in a small city in central Vietnam. We first provided data of speed measurement at 2 schools in the school zones to the government, and people were driving fast. They were going up to 80 kilometers per hour. Then we worked with engineers to design and install road modifications, so zebra crossings, speed bumps, speed sign reductions. We got experts in as well to provide trainings to the local police on enforcement techniques. And we educated school kids, teachers, parents, the community about the dangers of speeding and about the new speed limit in their school zone as well. And in parallel, we ran public awareness campaigns on TV, on social media, on billboards as well, to inform the public. Before and after all these interventions, we applied an internationally known risk assessment tool, star rating for schools. And I'm proud to say that both schools actually upgraded to 5 stars. That's the highest safety risk you can achieve. And that's been a really wonderful success story. But more importantly, also with these results, so the city's decision makers, they had like an investment case in their hand that speed reduction saved lives. And so last year in that city, in Pleiku, the city announced that it will allocate city funds for infrastructural upgrades in school zones at all schools throughout the city, and reduce to 30 kilometers per hour and enforce that as well. And this week, during UN Global Road Safety Week, we're actually launching the construction of the road modifications.
You say that it's very important to start at the local level before then appealing to policymakers nationally. How have you managed to garner the political will? Obviously, in many poorer developing countries, so much on the agenda, priorities often lie elsewhere. So how difficult is it to get their attention and to really motivate the relevant authorities to coordinate with each other and take action?
Yeah, so data has been a really important point for us. Without data, when we go in and speak to the decision makers and we have no proof in hand, then it's really hard. When you have results, especially from internationally acclaimed sources, they really saw the successes. They could see that the little projects that we did already saved lives. So that has really made a change. And we engaged the national level government right from the beginning as well, even in that smaller city of Pleiku, which has been very helpful.
Minister van der Brand, tell us about the benefits of lower speed, more livable streets, beyond preventing deaths and injuries on the roads, but also in the context of health, well-being and the environment.
Actually, it offers life quality, and that's how we sell it to people. It makes a city where cyclists and pedestrians feel safer, because the difference in speed is really felt by the people going on foot and by bike. If I'm on a street and somebody passes me at 50 an hour, 30 an hour, it really makes a difference. So it's about creating conditions where cycling and walking are more normal, about actually enhancing the mobile shift, and in that way making sure we have fewer air pollution and people are in better health, because if you cycle and you walk, you are in better health. It's also important on the matter of noise. We often underestimate the impact of noise in cities, and we know that by reducing the speed limit, we will be also reducing the noise pollution by a factor of 2, and having less noise will diminish the stress level of people and will also create nicer neighborhoods to live in. So I think that's really important to say. It's just one measure in a part of measurements, because it's not the only thing we're doing in Brussels. We're also redistributing public space and making sure that we create a city that is made for the people who live here, or come and visit here, or come and work here, and it's really made for the people who are using the city and not just made for traffic passing through. And that's really a shift, a mental shift we're trying to put in place, make sure that the public space is redistributed and make sure that you create a city where you want to come, where you want to visit, and not only want to pass through as fast as possible. So it will give the city back to people. It will create a more attractive city to live in and to visit.
And Miriam, perhaps some thoughts on the general reaction that you have seen in the region. Is there any particular place or any particular city, any community, any example you can offer where you have found people to recognize the benefits, where the reception has been positive?
We do. I mean, we have pilot projects in Bangkok as well, where speed is up to 90 on expressways, even 120. We got together we designed actually a public campaign on social media, where we got a very popular singer, and she mobilized people to point out what the issues in their communities were. So there were lots of voices, lots of pledges collected from community members, really saying, we don't want people to speed here, right where we live. These results were then brought to government in Bangkok and resulted in speed reductions as well. So public voices are really important.
Connecting with the public. All right, thank you very much. Really appreciate your thoughts and your insight on this, both Minister Elke van der Brandt and Miriam Sadiq. Thank you. Right, so let's move to the second part of our panel now. Joining us for this segment, we have Stephanie Holsworth, Associate Mobility Specialist from UN Habitat, Rob de Jong, Director and Head of Sustainable Mobility at UN Environment, and we're also very pleased to be joined by Omnia El Omrani, International Federation of Medical Students, Global Youth Advocate for Road Safety. So a very warm welcome to all of you. Stephanie, let me start with you, because we were just hearing on how some cities have been working on the 30K rule. Obviously, many cities, particularly in the developing world, in poorer countries, are growing and developing very quickly. What do you see as the specific challenges they face on road safety?
One of the issues that we can see is that transport investments are very often focused on very large infrastructure for private cars to cater for that ever-increasing transport demand that comes from the urbanization developments. And with speed over 50 kilometers per hour, as we have in many of our cities, private cars and motorized transport might not necessarily be the safest mode. So investments in sustainable and safe urban transport, particularly looking at the modes of walking, cycling, or also the modernization of public transport, should be accelerated much more. But we have seen that those investments have been particularly slow in low and middle income countries. And this is happening although non-motorized transport accounts for the majority of the trips. I would just like to share the example from African cities where we have found out that 78% of people walk for the everyday travels with an average time of 55 minutes. And what's also important to note is that those people don't do it out of choice, but rather out of necessity, maybe due to a lack of affordability of any other modes. At the same time, we have more than 80% of public transport run by informal businesses on the African continent, and also their operations and their business models are put in place in a way that they create very unsafe services. So we really have to look at how do we now support especially those rapidly urbanizing cities in investments on walking, cycling and public transport.
Rob, if I can come to you, because we've been obviously speaking about making some significant shifts on in terms of the approach to transportation, both for the environment and of course for safety, but really aren't policymakers mainly concerned about getting access to employment and services and about the efficiency of business? How realistic is it to expect this widespread shift to more walking and cycling?
Well, thank you, Mariam. So how realistic is it? Well, the question is actually, it's essential. So recently in UNET, we did some modeling with some universities, and we found that even if we go and take the most positive scenario of switching to electric vehicles, we still will not meet the targets of the Paris Climate Agreement. And that means that in addition to technology change, we need to have more public transport and we need to have more walking, cycling. So it's not a choice. If we want to meet the Paris Climate Agreement, we need to invest in walking and cycling in our cities. And this is possible. Look at COVID. What did we see during COVID epidemic? Many citizens in the cities around the world started walking and cycling. The facilities were not there. Some cities put pylons on the road saying this is not for cars, this is for cyclists. So what we need now is to catch up. We need to provide the infrastructure. And as Stephanie said, in the developing countries, the majority are still walking. We're building infrastructure for the minority that drive a private car. Very expensive. Now we need to, and COVID has given us a wake-up call. We need to now start building infrastructure for walking and cycling. We need it for safety, but we also need it for air quality and climate change.
Omnia, if I can come to you, tell us about how young people are feeling in all of this, because there are a massive growing youth populations in our cities. How important are these issues to them?
So from my perspective, working as a young doctor, but also a global health advocate, I'm part of a global youth coalition for road safety. We have mobilized over 400 members from 93 countries. And we recognize that road safety is the leading cause of death in our own demographic. Over 30% of road crash victims are children under the age of 25. And this means also that more than half of the road traffic victims are also pedestrians, which is really the reality that we are living as adolescents and youth, going to our school, walking every single day. And in spite of us being the most impacted demographic, our voices are consistently underrepresented at all levels of decision making. And nevertheless, in spite of how important these issues are for us, we are working at the front line. We are working to build the resilience of our communities, the capacities of our schools, by doing our local actions in countries all over the world, including countries like Belgium, Rwanda, Kenya, India, and so on. And we have a database of all the activities that are led by young people to specifically address road safety and sustainable mobility. And we also work with our schools through our star rating program for schools. But what I want to highlight is that we really also strongly advocate for 30 kilometers per hour, because we believe that this is the key to protecting and promoting the health of our current generation, but also of future generations to come, because we are the most vulnerable and we need these important laws to be implemented in our cities in order to both, as Rob mentioned, protect our health as humans, but also protect the health of the environment on which our future is depending on.
And Omnia, if I can ask you about the young people that you speak to, you said that their needs and aspirations are overlooked by policymakers. How difficult is it for them to get involved, to try and make sure that their voices are heard in terms of pushing for the sort of cities they want to live in?
Yes, so the main answer to your question would be the very evident lack of a sustainable and a meaningful mechanism for youth engagement. So countries, this is also on a country level and a global level. We do not have a consistent platform where we can share our needs, our activities, but also the demands that we see. As youth, we have evidence-based policy recommendations ready for policymakers to integrate it. We have that, for example, last year, we have a global youth statement that was adopted based on youth-led consultations that were done in 74 countries. In this statement, we have specific demands that address the SDGs related to road safety and how we envision safer cities. But for our call to actions and demands as well as commitments to be seen in the policy framework for road safety, we need our policymakers to create that meaningful space for us, a space that is sustainable, that is across all levels of decision making, but also on a bigger scale, we want the decision-making table to be reoriented, to have a space for us, to be part of the consultations that are being done, to be able to voice the needs that we see our communities have, but also the needs of our own demographic. But we cannot do that alone, and we also would love to have the support of UN agencies, for example, like with UNEP and UN Habitat, to really work with us, as well as other civil society organizations, for us to work collectively to shape the cities that we see, that we are going to live on. And finally, we know that right now there is a decade of action being drafted, and we would like to see our needs and us as youth to be a key stakeholder addressed in the decade itself.
Rob and Stephanie, I'd love to get your views on that. Perhaps just a quick thought on Omnia's remarks there. Rob, maybe if I can come to you first, what more can leaders and policymakers do to include the youth and other civil society organizations in their consultation process to really broaden the mechanisms for youth engagement?
Right. Well, as Omnia said, how do we shape our future cities? This is the question, right? And how do we shape them around human mobility rather than motorized or car mobility? Today, we design our cities around how do we get our cars to move. We're not designing our cities how to get humans to move. We need to shift from a car perspective to a human perspective. We need to design our cities around human mobility. And human mobility means we need to create more livable communities. Now, the question is, why is it that we're investing so much money in building roads for cars when with a fraction, 3 or 5% of that investment cost, we could also invest in walking and cycling facilities? It's because I think those that are using those facilities are often the ones marginalized, are not the rich people, are not the people that own a private vehicle. So we need to go to a system whereby young people, like Omnia, and women, and disabled people, and everybody that's walking and cycling has an equal voice as those that are driving their car. Some cities are doing that. But in a lot of cities, we still see investment in the old traditional, build more roads for more cars. In the end, it won't work. We see it everywhere.
Well, actually, it's fantastic to have the views of Omnia on this, because we are seeing the youth in cities all around the world becoming increasingly active on these issues. So I want to get to a question now from Maulin Makatange in the Philippines.
Hi everyone, my name is Maulin Makatangay and I'm from the Philippines. I work with yours, Youth for Road Safety, where we help empower young people to take meaningful action against the biggest killer of youth worldwide, road crashes. As you know, about 1,000 young people die on the world's roads every day, and majority of which are aged 15 to 29 years old. So my question for you, the panelists, especially the policymakers, is what more can we as young people do to get policymakers and decision makers to start listening to us and to start acting on our needs and demands for safer streets in our communities?
Okay, so the question from Maulin is, how can we get policymakers to prioritize low-speed streets and sustainable mobility in our communities, starting with Stephanie?
Yeah, I think one great example where, let's say, policymakers can meet young people is, for example, through open streets events. UN Habitat has organized and co-organized such events in various cities around especially Africa, for example, in Cape Town, in Addis Ababa, but also in Nairobi. And those events are really meant to create that awareness that we have been speaking about. And we celebrate the street as a public space. We celebrate the safety that we can experience on those during those car-free events, and celebrate other issues like environmental protection and so on. And those events really also acted as a platform where we had the policymakers come to the street, talk to the people, talk about what the people are actually demanding in terms of transport and what kind of experience they are looking for, and started creating those dialogues, I think, that are urgently needed. And I think Omnia has mentioned the need for those dialogues very much in what she was saying before.
And Rob, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's a bit of a generational issue, isn't it? I think people my age are more like all still thinking about private car use. If we look at young people, they look at mobility completely different. They mix mobility with being online. They don't necessarily want to own a car. They just want to be able to move, to be mobile. So I'm very positive that this will happen. Now, the big question is, how do we get the current decision makers that are not the young people to understand this concept of being mobile rather than, for example, private car use? I think most of it hinges on awareness raising. I think they're not purposely trying to block up their cities. They're not purposely trying to pollute the air. It is, they don't see the solution. And I also have to say, it is not as bad because it's happening everywhere at this moment. I live in the city of Nairobi, Kenya, and they're now massively building walking and cycling facilities. So I think all around the world, we see interest in other solutions for addressing the mobility problems, road safety, climate change emissions, etc., pollution. The problem is we need to support that. There's a lot of lack of awareness. How can you do this? How can you build proper walking and cycling facilities? How can you make sure you have proper mass transit systems? And there's still so much that we know and we're not sharing. We're not sharing how to do a mass transit system from developed country cities to developing countries. We're trying to reinvent the wheel every time again. I think that's, where some of the examples that Stephanie also gave, we can move forward on.
And Omnia, I'm curious to get your thoughts on Rob's comments there about there being this generational divide where perhaps the older generation can sometimes struggle to grapple with issues that, for the youth, the walking, the cycling, they can see the benefits of that. And they want their cities to be designed in that way, but it can be difficult to convince policymakers of that. What particular challenges have you faced in your work, and how have you coped with that?
Yes, so I agree in terms of how road safety can be an intergenerational issue, similar also to the issue of climate change, for example. The cities that we're living in, the planet that we're on, we as a generation will be the ones who will suffer the consequences most of the decisions led by policymakers, and yet we are not the ones making those decisions. And the challenges that we faced is, number one, when we're calling on policymakers with specific demands, they always need to have evidence to prove that. Either it's scientific evidence, but more importantly, community-based evidence. Listening into what the community has to say and facilitating this to the policymakers, which is what we are doing as young advocates. The second thing is to also try to, as Rob mentioned, build community awareness. And this is done by using personal stories, going beyond just numbers of deaths led by road traffic injuries, but talking about the stories of the victims and the families who would lose a family member to a road traffic accident. And it's also important to highlight that as young people, we see a responsibility in making sure that the policies that are formulated are implemented, and we're also holding our policymakers accountable, and we're always asking for transparency to see. We know that many countries have committed to the Sustainable Development Goals, the Decade of Action, and all of these targets that are formulated by the UN, and we see that our role will be to call on them to really walk the talk and implement the actions that they signed on and make our cities safer and healthier and livable for us and for our generations.
All right, thank you very much. We'll conclude there. Thank you very much to Omnia, Rob, and Stephanie. Now let's hear from a global campaigner whose name you'll be very familiar with, Zuleika Mandela, the granddaughter of Nelson and Winnie Mandela. Zuleika lost her own daughter to road traffic injury. Her daughter Zinani was only 13 years old when she was tragically killed on a street in Johannesburg. Here is Zuleika Mandela.
On this UN Road Safety Week, so many of us around the world are taking to the streets and demanding change. So many of us are coming together and we're saying the streets are for the people. Our streets are for us. What we want is quite simple. We want low speeds. We want livable streets in our communities where we can walk safely, where our children can get to school unharmed. All too often, in neighborhoods all around the world, people are being injured or killed on the roads. Streets have been built for traffic and not for people. As a mother, I believe our children are a priority. Why are we not doing everything we can to get them to school safely? Every single day, our children face unacceptable risks as they journey to school. Right here in my city, children are killed and injured just trying to get to school. And it's the same in every city here in Africa and around the world. This has to stop. We call for 30 km/h limits. More than 30 is a death sentence. Children going to school, the young, the old, and vulnerable must be protected on our streets. This is a fundamental human right, the right to survive and to thrive. Here in Soweto years ago, my grandparents fought for their rights. Today, I'm striving to keep their legacy alive. The poor and the vulnerable are forced to breathe toxic air and to have their children face speeding traffic every single day. Now it's time to say enough. Basic life-saving measures need to be in place. Is it too much to ask? Too often, there are no sidewalks, no safe crossings, nothing to slow the traffic. Our policymakers, our leaders are failing us. In the name of development, they're investing in roads to speed up the traffic, and we're paying with our lives. It is a crisis we can easily solve. The answer is right in front of us. Slow the traffic. Help people to walk and cycle safely. We have launched a call to action on low speeds with the support of the world leaders today. I call on leaders at all levels to join them. With partners around the world, we'll be taking this campaign forward in a new advocacy hub, which has 30 km/h streets as a key policy demand. Make our streets more livable. Help people get to work and to school safely. Help them lead healthier, more productive lives. Our streets are for the people. Our streets are for our planet. Our streets are for life.
Thank you very much, Zuleika, for those inspiring words. We now have Lord Robertson, Chairman of the FIA Foundation, our co-host for today. He's played a leading role in the global agenda on road safety.
Streets for Life. It's a powerful and unifying call to action. And we must all commit to achieving Streets for Life as the central objective of this decade of action. At the Stockholm conference, the FIA Foundation published a Manifesto 2030, calling for safe streets and investment in both walking and cycling. Our manifesto has a particular focus on the rights of children and youth. So today I can announce the launch by the FIA Foundation of a new advocacy hub to support our Manifesto 2030 agenda. Through that advocacy hub, the Foundation is committing more than 15 million euros over the next 5 years to support policy change for 30 kilometres an hour. We want to see specific and sustainable change. And to achieve this change, we'll be working with global agencies like UNICEF and UN Environment, as well as campaigners in countries and cities across the world. After all, we want to see every child able to walk to their community and in their community free from road danger. So let's work together to deliver Streets for Life.
Thank you, Lord Robertson. We can now hear from the President of the UN General Assembly, His Excellency Volkan Bozkır, on how safer streets can help us deliver the Sustainable Development Goals.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to join you for the launch of the 6th UN Global Road Safety Week and its Streets for Life #Love30 campaign. During a global pandemic, it's easy to forget or put aside the health and development risks associated with driving a vehicle. The truth is that few of us have not felt the shock, the loss, or anxiety of road accidents. In many ways, it has become an expected part of life, and this can lead to complacency. I commend the foresight of member states in tackling this complacency and ensuring the inclusion of global road safety in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Our efforts now must be to continue scaling up action and ambition. With the new decade of action for road safety 2021-2030, we have an opportunity to do that. Governments, the multilateral system, and civil society must work with all stakeholders to roll out actions that help support road safety. This includes incorporating road safety features into land use and transport planning, improving the safety features for vehicles, and setting and enforcing laws relating to key risks. For my part, I'm working with member states to prepare a high-level meeting of the UN General Assembly in 2022 on effective implementation of the global plan for the decade of action. Dear colleagues, managing speed is among the most practical, most efficient solutions to saving lives and with minimal cost. For this, I stand fully behind the #Love30 campaign. In closing, I would point to the height of the pandemic when many pedestrians reclaimed empty city streets and urban spaces. We should feel empowered and emboldened by this. Reducing the speed of vehicles in urban centers not only saves lives, but makes our cities more inviting and more accessible to all. Thank you, and I wish you the best in your discussion.
Thank you, Volkan Bozkır. Now, I want to introduce someone many of you will already be familiar with. She's won acclaim for many of her performances, including Memoirs of a Geisha and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Award-winning actor Michelle Yeoh is a goodwill ambassador for the Sustainable Development Goals, and campaigning on road safety has been her passion for many years. Michelle.
I campaigned hard to secure the first decade of action for road safety. I remember marching with thousands of children, making the case to ministers and government leaders, and celebrating in the United Nations on the day the decade of action was approved. Let's be proud of what has been accomplished. More countries adopting plans to tackle road deaths and injuries. Major initiatives helping to improve highway and vehicle safety. Road safety recognized in the Sustainable Development Goals with a strong target to halve road deaths and serious injuries by 2030. We now have a UN Special Envoy and a UN Road Safety Fund, joining with the World Health Organization to raise political attention and resources. So much has been achieved, but it is not enough, nowhere near enough. 10 years ago, the need for action to tackle road traffic deaths was compelling. Today, the case for action is extremely urgent. We need streets for life. Every day, 3,000 children and young people are still being killed or badly injured on our roads. The climate crisis demands that we reimagine how we design our cities and how we share our streets. COVID-19 is highlighting the terrible inequalities that exist within and between countries. We need change, and we are uniting for change with a clear call to action: Streets for Life. Making the case for reducing vehicle speeds in communities where children walk, cycle, learn and play, returning to children their basic right to explore their streets in safety. Because keeping traffic speed below 30 kilometers an hour near children is the vaccine that can save many thousands of lives. And low speed will encourage zero carbon travel. All of us walking and cycling more to help clean our air and protect our planet. Streets for health. Streets for climate. Streets for people. For all of us, and especially for our children. So, for people and planet, please join me in the United Nations campaign to secure Streets for Life.
Thanks, Michelle. Well, now to conclude the event, but of course to keep the momentum going throughout this week and beyond, because that's the important thing. That's why we're all here. The last word belongs to Dr. Etienne Krug of the World Health Organization. Etienne has been busy spearheading the global effort on road safety. Etienne.
Dear colleagues and friends, thank you so much for joining us today for the launch of the 6th UN Global Road Safety Week. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and thank you so much to all of our committed speakers. We've had fantastic leaders showing their willingness to address speed all over the world. We're at a crossroads. We can continue doing what we're doing and continue paying a huge price with deaths and injuries in the millions on our roads all over the world. Or we can take things in our hands. Of course, my preference is the second option. Take things in our hands. Let's all go home and make sure we call upon our leaders to take the right decisions, to take action, to decide to limit speeds at 30 kilometers per hour in the centers. That means good laws, enforcing the laws, infrastructure changes, vehicle improvements, and awareness of all of us to behave when we are driving. Our streets don't belong to cars. Our streets belong to the people, to the adults and the children who need to walk, cycle, play in all safety on the roads. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great Global UN Road Safety Week, and let's move to action. Thank you so much.